Is the U.S. preparing a strike on Iran aimed at regime change? Trump trolls Davos as he secures a deal on Greenland. Russian casualties in Ukraine have now exceeded those of any major power in any conflict since the Second World War. And finally, is there an attempt to overthrow Xi Jinping in China? You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics. Mensch-Kight Geopolitics is your home for conservative commentary on international affairs with an eye toward Israel and the Middle East. I'm your host, Isaac Kight, your lovable lawnsman, your gregarious Vulcan, your mad genius, your shadow president, and your prophet of things to come. Welcome back, my friends. It has been a little too long, but I am getting back on it. It's still January. It's still the same month as the last episode that was published. Let's be happy about that. I'm trying really hard. The great news, the big news, it's so huge. It's so great. We're going to make everything great again. It's going to be so awesome. It's just incredible. I have finished editing the book. The book is essentially done. Now I'm having some family members proofread it, some very bright people proofread it, and that way we can make sure that, all of my grammar is correct, all of my sentences make sense, and that kind of thing. A little bit of content stuff. I mean, did I overdo it here? Did I underdo it there? This kind of thing. Should have mentioned this, should have mentioned that. But these little details will work themselves out, and then eventually the book will go to publishing. My next job with it, of course, will be to go back through and note where I want pictures and what pictures I want, maps, that kind of thing. Maps are your friends, my friends, and they help us understand things. So when, we talk about, there being, 14 states at this particular time or whatever, it's good to have a map that shows you, those are the states we're talking about. So this is a good thing. All right. Oh, it's been so much work, my friends, on this book, getting all this stuff written and heartache and wanting it done and the longing, and finally, I think, pretty close to being there. So this book, of course, is about the latter Constitution, about Amendments 11 through 27. A lot of attention paid to the Philadelphia Convention and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, but the latter amendments just don't get as much. And I also covered all of the amendments that were proposed, introduced by Congress, but not ratified by the states, a number of different proposals in Congress and by major American political thinkers, and a couple other things, discussion of the civil rights movement. I mean, 4 amendments address that topic alone, right? So that's an important thing. And so lots and lots and lots of good stuff in there. Lots of great Supreme Court cases. Helps you understand kind of how all this came together. Not only will you understand better how the Constitution works, but you'll have a better understanding, once you've read it, about, how it went forward from, the Bill of Rights. Anyway, just great stuff. And I may in the future, now that I've kind of done this, I'm just, throwing ideas out. I may in the future write about the constitutional reformers, because, of course, James Madison, who was key figure in the drafting of the Constitution, was involved in the writing of the Bill of Rights and what ultimately became the 27th Amendment. And he also played a role with the 12th Amendment. And so he's just this incredible giant of a constitutional figure, and yet kind of a mediocre president, and a figure who just doesn't get enough attention in American history, right? James Madison. He's a giant, like Alexander Hamilton. But Hamilton's economic reforms and Hamilton's time as Secretary of Treasury, and of course his infamous duel with Aaron Burr, he gets a lot more attention, I think. And Madison, he just gets overshadowed by Jefferson. Jefferson was the consummate idealist of the Democratic Republicans. Anyway, but I digress. Also, we should know more about Thaddeus Stevens, the author of the 13th Amendment, and one who was a driving force behind the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and the resulting 14th Amendment. In any case, Thaddeus Stevens, very important. And of course, my favorite duo, Senator Birch Bayh and Representative Emanuel Seller. And of course, Emanuel Seller was a Yid just like me, so I like that very much. Always love to be able to talk about a Jewish guy who did great things in American politics. But Birch Bayh of Indiana and Emanuel Seller, representative of New York, these guys shepherded the 23rd and 24th Amendments through Congress, and then were themselves the proponents and authors ultimately of the 25th and 26th Amendments. So these guys played a huge role in 4 amendments. They also proposed direct election of the president and a couple of other major things. I mean, these guys are just giants. All right, so those 4 men alone would be worth a lot of attention in talking about constitutional reform, and it would just be, I think, it'd just be valuable. And there are many, many others behind other amendments and people we were talking about. So we'll see. But right now, the main thing was let's just talk about these amendments, the Supreme Court cases around them, the legislation around them, some of the historical events that were around them, and then, the various proposals and stuff. Anyway, you can tell I'm excited about it. I'm glad I finished the darn thing finally. And now it's being edited and reviewed and these kinds of things. And at some point, it will reach a place where it is ready for publishing. And hopefully I'll be able to get that out to all of you. I know I've said several listeners emailing in every once in a while, how's the book going? When are we going to see it? Yeah, I hope soon. I hope soon. I published 2 books of poetry, and that's great, but nobody reads books of poetry. So, and I just wanted to prove it. I just wanted to make sure, confirm. We weren't sure about this. All right. Okay, a little entertainment. If you're interested, if you're on X, look up the Amelia videos. This is awesome. So the lefties in Britain created a game to promote diversity. And in it, they have this English woman, an attractive young woman named Amelia with purple hair. And British right-wingers took her and have made a whole bunch of AI videos of her promoting Englishness and opposing Islamic takeover of Britain and all this kind of thing, and generally promoting free speech and right-wing values, and talking about how we should be proud to be British and all this sort of thing. And it's been great. And this has spurred the creation of similar characters for France and Italy and all these. Oh, it's been a great time. There's even a video of her hanging out with Donald Trump. Of course, we don't need such a figure in America. I guess we already have the Donald. We have the orange hair. So anyway, this is just great stuff. I love this. I geek out over it. The AI, the whole 9 yards. It's good stuff. But most importantly, the backfire. I love the backfire when they go out and try to create things to propaganda to lead us on, and we just take it and throw it right back in their face. That's awesome. That said, just a quick side note to the Europeans. I mean, it's really great, you guys, that you're starting to stand up for yourselves, and Germany for German values, and France for French values, and England for English values, and so on and so forth, etc., etc. That's really great. Awesome. Love the turn. Enjoy that sort of thing. Okay. Allow me to introduce you to an interesting concept. It's called a baby. A man gets together with a woman, and the birds and the bees and all of this sort of thing, and then you have a child. Europeans just stopped doing this. Kind of a basic human thing. And so when Europeans stopped doing this, when they stopped being this child of which we speak, the birth rates declined, and now there are no more Europeans. Germany is deindustrializing because they do not have Germans to work in factories. Okay. So, love the Amelia, love the talk, love all that good stuff. Now, go get, a couple of beers in you, go hang out with some lovely, English, French, German, or whatever lady, and have some babies, get married, have some kids, go to church, go to synagogue, whatever you think, but you go to church, have some kids and have some values. You know what I mean? It'll be beautiful when European birth rates start to get back up. When they start to rise, then we can take Europe seriously. Until then, Europe is dying, and it's nice all of this sentiment and all of this talk of Europeans could do this and we can stand up for that and all that. Great. Have some kids. I should know, my friends. I have 7 of them myself, and I love every one of them. They're so much fun. Little Cecily, people have been asking about. She's doing just fine. She's a little small. She's a little bit behind developmentally, which we expect for Down syndrome, but she is doing great. She's the happiest, friendliest, most social member of the family. All the 6 other kids and us adults, everything in the house now just kind of revolves around her to a certain extent, not all of it, but everybody loves her. She's just a great time. And so a lot of things have come to be about her. So she's having a good time, and we're managing. It's good. All of the kids are well. Teaching my oldest how to drive, getting his driver's license. He's thinking about getting a job. I mean, it's like, they grow up so fast. He's going to be an adult soon. I'm not ready to have an adult child, but okay. Quick entertainment notes. K-pop Demon Hunters continues to win awards, do all that kind of stuff. If you haven't seen it yet, please check it out. Don't let the name put you off. It really is a great movie about traditional Korean values and mental health, really, about, getting right with yourself and all these kinds of things. Great music. EJ, really incredible singer. She's done a couple of solos herself and that kind of thing. Good thing to check out. Another thing that's been comical in the entertainment is there's a Japanese series, an anime. I'm going to talk about anime called Frieren. And in Frieren, it's about this elven mage, and she is 1,000 some odd years old, and she's gone on some great adventure, and now she gets together with a few people and goes on another great adventure. It's a really interesting thing, but finding demons now. Japanese, Koreans, whatever, they think of demons as, they're not real people. They are, a force of evil and this kind of thing. And so they're going out and destroying the demons. And so people around the world have kind of picked up on this theme of demon destruction as a right-wing construct of, fighting evil and not backing down, because this character is she just destroys the evil and she doesn't apologize for it. So that's a bit of fun. It's kind of set in a medieval sort of European environment, and the art is really great. The Japanese is beautiful, although I think it's funny that so much of Japanese conversation is, one version or another of soul. Soul dane, soul ka. It's just... So, they keep trying to translate that in the subtitles as anything but just I understand, right? And these kinds of things, these kind of standard responses that are already built into Japanese conversation. It's hilarious to me. We have a little bit of fun about it, But anyway, so I might recommend checking that out. Available on Netflix and Crunchyroll, which is an anime site for those of you who don't know. In any case, back in the day, I used to watch, Eva and Full Metal Alchemist and, Lodos Wars. Some great old Star Blazers, right? Definitely not Space Battleship Yamato. Anyway, some of the great old animes that were a lot of fun back then, and Bubblegum Conflict. Nobody's ever heard of it, but early cyberpunk stuff. So lots of fun. In any case, I don't watch a lot of them, but this one I have. All right. American politics. All right. So this might sound profound to you, my friends. I'm about to give you some pieces of wisdom that will help preserve your life and give your life, I don't know if it'll give you meaning, but it'll give you more time on this planet. Do not ram police officers with your car. I know it's profound, it's deep. You would never have thought of it, right? Like if you, try to drive over police officers and cause them injury, internal bleeding in this case, you threaten their lives, they may have to use force. If you bring a gun to a protest, and you turn that protest into a riot, I guess I should say, if you bring a gun to a riot and you attack law enforcement officers, And then you go to reach for that gun, even though it seems the guy had been disarmed already. The officer had not informed everyone that the suspect had been disarmed. In any case, the guy was attacking ICE agents and attacking these law enforcement officers, and then reached for the gun, and they shot. I mean, they have to protect their lives, and they're fighting these insurgents. That's what these people are. They're engaged in a Marxist insurgency, organized, as it seems, by the governor's campaign manager, campaign staff. So Waltz is in on that, of course, because with all the fraud and whatever, they want the attention on anything other than the criminal charges that are about to come down, because it looks like Keith Ellison and Tim Waltz and Ilhan Omar and all of these people have been involved in these fraud schemes with the Somali daycares, etc., etc. So much fraud, just billions and billions and billions of fraud, dollars of fraud. To quote Carl Sagan, Rush Limbaugh used to make jokes about him years ago, billions and billions of years, this kind of thing. But just so much fraud, like, oh my God. And they just want to make this about ICE and the illegal immigrants. So there they are out there rioting and protesting, blocking ICE to prevent them from arresting pedophiles and sex offenders and murderers. Now, I'm going to throw a statistic out there, my friends. I'm curious what you think might be driving this. The murder rate in the United States has come down by 20%. 20%. And CNN, MSNBC, all these guys, they're flabbergasted. They are completely dumbfounded. How is it possible that this could happen? What could be causing this? What has happened in our society? What obvious thing? What possibly could be the thing? I mean, it can't be that we're deporting the criminals, criminal illegal aliens. That couldn't have an impact on the murder rate or the overdose rate. That couldn't go down because we're fighting trafficking and arresting drug traffickers and illegal drug traffickers here and blowing up boats full of drugs out in the Caribbean. It couldn't have anything to do with that. Certainly not. The news keeps getting better and better. So anyway, those things are mostly I talk about geopolitics. The American domestic politics isn't necessarily in the show's scope, but I do bring it up because it impacts the elections, and it does, from there. It's just, I don't know. I'm sorry, my friends. Like, yeah, I get frustrated when I get pulled over for a speeding ticket. It hasn't happened in years, but when it happens, like anyone, I get frustrated. But you know what? I always thank the officer for what they do, even if I get a ticket, because they're risking their lives out there to keep the rest of us safe. Under no circumstances do I give the officer any reason to be concerned for his or her safety. Right? This is not hard. Okay. Now, is it possible that the officer could be wrong and I could get ticketed or arrested or something for, something I didn't do, or maybe I've been misidentified or something? Things like that can happen. That's not fun. Okay. But, you write it out. That's life. Okay. If I go to a protest, Scott Besson said it best, like, have you ever been to a protest? He says to the reporter, well, I've covered a protest. No, I've been to a protest, Scott Besson says. And I took a billboard, not a gun. Right? If you go to a protest, you don't need a weapon. All right. But if you're going to a riot to attack law enforcement officers, anyway. Okay. Let's talk about a couple of interesting things that have happened that you won't hear in the news, because this is a real facts kind of show. There has been a huge shift in the Hispanic community, and it isn't done yet. It started with like a 15% uptick in Trump's approval rating among Latinos. We have seen throughout the Americas, in particular, so outside the US, polls have shown that in Argentina, in Brazil, in Colombia, everywhere, President Trump's approval, like people who like Trump, are up way high. They overwhelmingly approve of the removal of Maduro and the ongoing efforts to make that government, Delcy Rodriguez and all of them, behave. Overwhelmingly supported in the Americas. Very, very popular. In the United States, it has led to a huge shift of Hispanic support for Trump. The wave is still crashing against the beach. Okay, it has not begun to recede yet. It hasn't stopped. We keep seeing the numbers rising. Trump went from like negative 26% approval to, negative 15, and then to -2. And now, there's some polls out there showing that he has, positive, 10 point spread now among Latinos, that 9 or 10% more Hispanic voters approve of Trump than disapprove. That is a huge shift. We've also seen in the polls the generic Republican is now just 1 point behind the generic Democrat in the House races. So Republicans are surging. And if we're smart, especially with the economy coming, get a few more reforms passed, hold that thought, we're headed in the right direction. Okay, so there's a very good chance that the GOP could pull this off. But that's huge. Those are huge shifts. Nobody wants to talk about it. CNN out of their mind, out of their gourd, completely just like pulling their hair out, blood streaming from their eyes, sweating blood. They're just completely, well, they're kind of nuts over there. Anyway, they're completely crazy, fit to be tied, because their own polls, they've gone out there and found a whole bunch of polls with blunt questions like, should we remove all illegal aliens from the country? And the polls consistently, 54%, 55%, 56, 64% from Morning Consult. Okay. By the way, the poll that I was talking about, the generic Democrat, also Morning Consult, not a right-wing pollster. But anyway, consistently, like, well, the ABC poll said undocumented immigrants. Okay, but whatever you call them, the American people overwhelmingly support the removal of all of them. Polls also show that Americans would approve of reduced immigration, legal and otherwise. Like, generally speaking, Americans want less immigration. People are just tired of it. I think mostly this is an effect of the illegal immigration. I think, our immigration policies, once we've got enough of the illegals out, could be adjusted. Personally, my thing is, let's do it for the economy. Let's bring in enough unskilled labor to meet our needs, but not so much that it depresses the wages of Americans. Bring in a few skilled people, but not so that it depresses the wages of Americans. Governor Abbott, no more H-1B visas for state universities, right? I mean, just, he's put a moratorium for till 2027. Great. I mean, if you need tech workers, how about you educate some Americans to do that? Okay, I mean, we have lots of smart Americans here who could do that job. But a funny thing, those people want to be paid to do the job, right? Highly skilled people that are going to demand, that high salary, $250,000 a year to do that job. So what they want to do is go bring in, somebody from India who'll do the job for half that or less, right? It's just a scam. Okay, stop bringing in these foreign people. Hire Americans. Oh, but the Americans don't know how to do the job. Well, then that's a failure of education. You have failed to teach. It's not a me problem. Sounds like that's a you problem. So hire somebody who has almost all of the skills you need and teach them the rest, and pay them a wage that an American. Oh, my friends. Every now and then the working man in me gets, the landsman gets just, ready to get my fists out. Let's have a couple of beers and take it out back, eh? Because it's like we live here, we work here, we just want to prosper, we just want to succeed, and there's all these people that just like bring in foreign people, whatever. Okay. Let's move on to other good news. Okay, so I talked about the economy, right? So we had -5%, negative 0.5%, half a point negative growth in the first quarter of 2025. As I said, but coming off the Biden years, we were headed into recession. If Kamala Harris had been reelected, we would have gone into recession. The second quarter would have been negative growth, and we'd had 2 quarters of negative growth. That is a shrinking economy for 2 quarters. That is called a recession, right? We have a term for that. Anyway, it didn't happen. Why? Because Trump came to office, the economy turned around. By the second quarter of 2025, Q2, we were up at 3.8. Third quarter numbers were estimated to be 4.3, and that got looked around. It's now been adjusted up to 4.4. So it looks like the Q3 number was better than we had even anticipated. So that was 0.6 of a point higher than the quarter two, which was already, 3.8. I mean, that's a huge swing from negative zero point 0.5. All right. You're talking about, 4.3% swing from the red into the green, right? Into positive territory. That was huge. That's the Trump effect. Quarter three, 4.4%. We're already up another tenth of a percent. Estimates for the fourth quarter, as I've talked about, 5.3, right? Which was a whole point higher than the 4.3 estimate. Well, now that it's 4.4, then 5.3 would be, 9/10 of a percent, so almost a percent higher. Still 5% growth. That is the estimate. Now, again, as I've said, these numbers get adjusted. As I just talked about, quarter three number has been adjusted again. Now, Scott Bessen's been going around talking about this, and I need to address it because you'll get people out there, well, that's good, but we're not seeing any manufacturing jobs continue to contract. We're losing manufacturing jobs. Trump hasn't fixed the problem. Construction jobs are way up. Why? Because we're building the factories. Oh my God, people. You don't just, I, it's funny how these people are, they don't think. Now, as a lawnsman, okay, as a guy who works, right, sometimes we move my company, and work I've done has been, we're moving a blast furnace. Sometimes it's a gas turbine. Sometimes it's oil field equipment, big stuff, heavy stuff. Sometimes it's wind turbines. It's kind of a waste, but hey, they're moving them. We move big stuff. That's what we do. But the lead time for these things is huge. Like, you have to manufacture it. It's like you have a plant. You want to reopen a steel plant. It's like, okay, so we need blast furnaces. We need this. We need that. You have to order all this stuff. It has to be built wherever it is. And then it has to be transported by ship, barge, or truck to the location, installed. It just takes years to build industrial plant, right? For the first time, my friends, for the first time since 1999, in 2025, headed into 2026 here, the United States has produced more steel than Japan. Right? We are back. We are back. But anyway, this stuff takes time. Okay, it really does. So we're building all of the plant. We're building up the economy. The manufacturing is coming. Those jobs are coming. It's just going to take time. Patience, right? Patience is a virtue, right? So let's be patient and wait for it to arrive. But the point is, the economy really is growing and leaps and bounds. Good stuff. Let me see here. One more story on the economy. Well, I want to talk about Davos, and I guess some of that comes into there. But the point is that we're looking to big growth. Numbers keep being adjusted upwards. The Trump economy is huge. Even CNN has been forced to admit this. They had a segment recently. I saw a piece of it on X because I don't watch CNN, of somebody having to, well, the economy is up and everybody's, energy prices are down, gas prices are down. Oh, the inflation rate getting close to, it's like 2.7%. We're getting down to the 2% target, right? And that's with a growing economy. Okay, when the economy is growing, that tends to have inflationary impact. It is inflationary. It drives higher prices, but it's coming down. So we're not, Trump keeps saying this non-inflationary growth, and we're getting there. It's happening. We are growing much faster. Wages are growing faster than inflation. Okay, anyway. All right. Davos. This is just great. So every year, these elitist stuff shirts who think they're so much better than us. We should eat bugs, that we should live in energy efficient housing and tall skyscrapers, stacked on top of one another, in honeycombs and this kind of thing. We peasants, we should live like that and be efficient and driving in electrical vehicles and all this kind of thing, while they get in their private jets and fly to Davos in Switzerland and, live it up. These wealthy elites are just so much better than we are, so much more morally superior. And they know what the real problems in the world are, like climate change and this kind of nonsense. Oh, These people are just so disconnected. When people say globalists, they can mean many things. Sometimes it's a slur for Jews, but most of the time they mean Davos. These stuffed shirts who go and talk. And so Donald Trump went there and spoke for an hour and just trolled the snot out of them. I mean, he just stood up at Davos and told these people what a bunch of idiots they are. The green new scam. And I'm just like, yes, yes, thank you. I was a little bit miffed that Donald was even going, because it's like Davos isn't a place he should go, but it was a great opportunity. He got to speak to these idiots face to face, and he trolled them. Secretary Lufkin, Al Gore was booing him. He's like, I didn't come here for Al Gore's approval. Yeah, good. If Al Gore's booing him, then he's probably doing his job. Uh, so this is just awesome stuff. But Scott Bessent had a great time there. And of course, Gavin Newsom decided to show up, but his speech got canceled. He's just, he's not important enough to go to Davos. Made some comment about Trump being like a T-Rex or something like that. And Scott Bessent was like, well, a T-Rex is known for, getting what it wants, and it's a predator, whatever. Meanwhile, Gavin Newsom is a lot like a big brontosaurus with the brain the size of a walnut. Go Scott Bessent. He's been trolling. Go out there, find the video clips, YouTube, X, wherever. Scott Bessent has just been on a roll, just tearing these people up. It's been awesome. So with all that, the whole crew, Trump's crew that went there, Marco Rubio, oh my God, Marco has just been awesome. Just, in his Senate hearings and in all the things he's done. Mexico is going to stop shipping oil to Cuba. And their reason, President Sheinbaum said, was Marco Rubio. Marco told her to, and she is complying. So Marco's doing an awesome job there. Meanwhile, we had Holocaust Remembrance Day, and J.D. Vance wrote this big long post about it, and couldn't find it within himself to include the word Jews anywhere in this post. Talking about the Holocaust, but nothing about Jews. So, the danger, his extremism continues, and he continues to be a dangerous radical. So I'm really looking forward to Marco, see if, Marco's popularity rises. He'd make a great president, and a competent one, and one where we don't have to worry about why he's deliberately excluding the word Jews from his Holocaust memorial post or this kind of nonsense, like J.D. Vance, who also recently, when things got heated with Iran, suggested that Iran should come back to the table to negotiate. And I'm like, those of us who are Iran experts are all just sitting here with our hands in our heads like, oh my God. When you say stuff like that, the regime uses negotiations as a delaying tactic. That's all they do. So you'll note that, yes, there have been some negotiations, Trump, giving them a chance to surrender, basically, that the leadership leaves and they give up the nuclear program and have free elections, maybe. We won't bomb them. I'll come back to that in a minute. But the suggestion that somehow this could all be, we could just negotiate and delay, and then the government could keep killing its people while it's developing a nuclear weapon. This was just, it's like, tell me you don't know anything about international relations without telling me you don't know anything about international relations. So J.D. Vance continues to disappoint. But that's life, I suppose. Anyway, so Trump trolled Davos. Yes, he referred to Greenland as Iceland twice. I heard it. You heard it. Everyone who listened to the speech heard it. Who cares? It's easy to get the two confused. But I wouldn't. Okay, but sometimes when you're speaking, I've had it happen on the podcast. I'll hear myself use one word instead of another. I mean, it happens to people. The media and senators trying to make a big deal out of it. It's like, Joe Biden didn't know what the heck he was talking about half the time, and couldn't string a sentence together. And Kamala Harris talked about things like, well, there's this country, Ukraine, and there's another bigger country called Russia, and Russia's attacking Ukraine. It's like, what are you talking to, a kindergarten class here? Just, all right. Zombie filibuster, which is in the book. If you're interested, the history of the cloture vote, Rule 22, and all of that is in the forthcoming book, The Latter Constitution. And that's the working title. We'll see what I go with ultimately. So, the cloture vote The reason that Mike Lee and a number of others are calling it the zombie cloture vote, zombie filibuster basically, is because when the Democrats have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they're going to get rid of it. I mean, they almost got rid of it in 2022 when they were trying to do amendments to the Voting Rights Act to get more seats in the South. They were going to try to force Southern states to draw more African American districts. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court's hearing a case about VRA that's basically saying, look, voter suppression is long over. African Americans vote. Can we stop using race as a means of determining districts because we've remedied the situation and now we could just be political, right? Republicans and Democrats, right? The only time race is allowed to be used is to mitigate voter suppression from the past. It's in the past. So VRA may be going down, in which case the GOP is likely to gain more seats or, arrange the South is likely to redistrict and there'll be fewer Democrat seats. Anyway, so the filibuster is gone. It's dead. It's already gone because at some point the Democrats in the future will have those three offices. And so it's a zombie filibuster. We might as well just get rid of it. And the GOP is finally setting that up. So Democrats got their knickers in a knot in the House over $10 billion of ICE funding that's in the continuing resolution. They want to pull that money out because ICE is bad, enforcing the laws are bad, a 20% reduction in the murder rate is bad, sending pedophiles and sex offenders out of the country, that's bad. Wow. So I talked in the last episode about how strategically Republicans should set the stage for an opportunity to get rid of the filibuster. And how do you do that strategically? Well, you tie it to popular legislation things. So if the Democrats are looking at shutting down the government over $10 billion in ICE funding, which is, what did I just talk about? 55, 56%. CNN talking about these polls. These are, ABC, CBS, Morning Consult. This is not Rasmussen, right? Rasmussen, I think, is a better pollster. This is me. RMG, much better pollster. But unfortunately, we're getting, they're getting their polls from the left. Even those left-wing pollsters find a majority of Americans want the deportations to continue, but they're going to shut down the government over $10 billion in ICE funding. At least that's the threat. So now, thanks to people, Representative Luna in the House and other staunch Republicans who have strategized this, they're tying the SAVE Act, which is voter ID and only citizens voting, to the continuing resolution. And so basically the Democrats, if they fund the government when they vote and we get the 60 votes on cloture, they're going to have to vote not only for the continuing resolution, but also to secure our elections. 80%, my friends, 80% of Americans want our elections secure. We want citizens voting. We want voter ID. Everyone supports this. Very popular thing. I don't care. I mean, I do care, but I don't care as much who wins the election, right? I want to know it was a fair election. Now, if the other side wins, upcoming elections, they're, in the next 2 years here, especially if they were to win it all in 2028, they've already told us that they're going to prosecute everybody they disagree with politically, that they're going to rig the elections, ensure that, we never win again. They're going to make sure that they stay in power. So that would be bad. I'm just making the point that I would like to know the elections are fair. If any particular congressman wins an election or loses an election, I just want to know that was we the people. Did we make the right choice? Did we make a stupid choice? That's fine. We the people can do that. But we all just want to know that our elections are fair. And the SAVE Act is so important. Oh my God. So tying it to the continuing resolution. So now the budget, $10 billion in ICE funding and the SAVE Act are all going to be in one beautifully wrapped package. And if the Democrats want all of that, want the budget to pass and the welfare spending and all the stuff that goes out, although we're suspending child care and, other fraud, right? Whew. And there's a lot more of it. Oh God, California's full of fraud. But, there's more of that. Okay. Anyway, so, That's a brilliant strategy. So now if the Democrats vote that down, if they filibuster that, if they threaten to shut down the government and vote to shut down the government over, funding for ICE and the SAVE Act, overwhelmingly popular legislation, right? Overwhelmingly popular agendas, then I think it will justify the GOP in using the nuclear option, which you'll learn about in my book, and setting the cloture vote to a majority of the Senate, just getting rid of the 60 vote margin altogether. That would be brilliant. It's about time. It's something that Senators Mondale and Pearson, Mondale Democrat, Pearson Republican, tried to do in 1977, 76, 77 era. That didn't ultimately get through. But what should have been done? But you'll learn about that when I publish the book. In any event, brilliant strategy. Finally, the GOP is getting on track. If that filibuster is gone and the SAVE Act is passed, so it's like either the Democrats are going to vote to pass the SAVE Act and preserve the filibuster, and $10 billion for ICE, or they're going to vote against all of that. We get rid of the filibuster, we pass it anyway, and we are passing overwhelmingly popular legislation. Then the GOP can go on and reform healthcare and reform, pass a number of other important reforms. There's all this affordability talk. Well, there are a lot of policies in the federal government and federal law that, if changed, would increase affordability. Okay, so that all of that, I could talk for hours. I could talk for hours. I'm going to close that. Let's go talk about, after the break, I'll talk about Iran, which is another big issue, updates on some other geopolitical things going on in the world, and a little about Xi Jinping. You're listening to Mensch-Kight Geopolitics with Isaac Kite. Or as the internet trolls say, mouthpiece of the Zionist conspiracy, spokesman for the elders of Zion, highly paid propagandist of the Mossad. Yeah, no. Now you're messing with the son of a mensch. Iran. God, it's horrible. Videos of the protests, so many young people killed. There's influencers like the motorcycle young lady used to ride the motorcycles around, and college students, young people with their lives ahead of them with great potential being killed, murdered by the regime. Their families not even allowed to mourn or hold proper funerals for them because of the fact that they resisted the regime. Moreover, we've seen pictures of the body bags with people who have various IVs, in them and patches and such from the hospital. The regime has been going into ambulances and going into the hospitals and taking dissidents out and shooting them in the head, right? Those IVs weren't run. Those patches weren't put on when they, after they were shot in the head, right? That was all done before. This regime is as inhuman as they can be. For years, they've committed these horrors against us. They've trained and egged on Hezbollah and Hamas to treat Israelis this way, with the tacit support of Western anti-Semites. And now they're doing it to their own people. It is horrifying. It's got to stop. But the people of Iran are rising up. Trump said help was on the way, but unfortunately it sounds as though the Qataris weren't going to let us use their air bases. Well, why should they? They're basically puppets of the Iranians. And they spend, like 5 times all of the money that's used by the pro-Israel lobby, on, lobbying the U.S., let alone what they put into the universities. Basically, it's Iran buying influence in the U.S. Sleazy, just completely sleazy, the Qataris. Gutter is aptly named. Anyway, so Trump decided to take a different strategy. He also seems to have heard from military advisors that if he wants to have an effective campaign, he's going to need more aircraft. So, to that end, a number of squadrons have been moving to the area. F-15E Strike Eagles have left bases in the UK and moved to Jordan. We have seen a large number of tanker planes move to the region. Um, More of our planes are moving into the UAE and Bahrain, countries that will let us use their bases. And of course, the USS Abraham Lincoln strike group on Astabe and her escorts hightailed it from the Pacific over into the Arabian Sea, and they have now gone dark. So tonight, as I'm recording this, tonight the bombing could happen. Wouldn't that be great? It'd be very great timing. Here I'd be telling you about this, that that bombing could happen. So um, that's going on. The George H.W. Bush Sr., basically, aircraft carrier battle group, is also headed to the region. We've got a couple of ships in the Mediterranean that are there to help protect Israel, more THAAD systems and Patriot batteries, and more missile interceptors brought to the region so we can protect our forces from Iranian retaliation. And of course, the Israelis are on alert, high alert. Whether or not Israel will participate in the operation is in question. There's been a lot of debate back and forth about that. We will see. But I think this would be best as a clean U.S. operation. I did refer to us not having Israel and the U.S. not having coordinated operations. I meant offensive. Somebody did correct, yes, they coordinated the defense against Iranian ballistic missiles. That's true. And that was also coordinated with Jordan, Britain, France, and other aircraft that were in the area and helped intercept those things. Brilliantly well done, but that was a defensive operation. A coordinated offensive operation in Iran would be beautiful. And like I said, with Midnight Hammer, when the B-2s and the F-22s came in, B-2s to drop the GBU-57 bunker busters into Fordow and the other nuclear sites, the Israelis just got out of the way, but Iranian air defenses had already been destroyed, and these are stealth planes anyway. So, they came, they saw, they conquered, Weni, Weedy, Wiki, and they left. So that is that. But this operation will be a little bit different. And U.S. forces, there is, we're gathering in the region real firepower. Now, an interesting thing for my vets out there, the F-35 has been flown in combat only by Israel. The F-35I, which is called the Adir, that's been flown in combat. And the Israelis have done, in their flying it and operating the plane and the things they've learned about it. All of that information, of course, gets sent back to the U.S. The U.S. gets to learn about the operation of the aircraft. And I've told you guys, because you guys are in the know, Israel has saved the United States about $100 billion in operational costs to fly the plane and test it under these harsh conditions of constant operation. Land, refuel, rearm, back in the air, flying from, Israel to Iran, dropping bombs, flying back, refueling along the way, landing, rearming, refueling, getting back in the air. You know what I mean? This constant drum of operation has tested the aircraft's limits. Everything has its limits. I mean, eventually your car needs an oil change. Eventually it needs more brakes, replace the brakes. Eventually, filters, suspension, right? Learning what the F-35 can do is huge. And so that's saved the United States a whole lot of money. But an interesting thing, when the F-35C, the naval variant of the F-35, was introduced, the U.S. Navy could not operate them on most carriers. Only the USS Ford had the right blast shields, for launching these aircraft. And the other carriers, the Nimitz carriers, needed to be adjusted. They need to be retrofitted to have the ability to launch these planes. Their engines are just so powerful that the old blast shields, those are the big things that come up behind the jet when it's on the catapult, protects the rest of the ship from the heat and the force of the engines. Well, the F-35's engines are just so powerful. You need a bigger, badder shield. It was literally melting the other blast shields. So you need something gnarlier. Well, the Ford had that, and the John F. Kennedy, which will be commissioned eventually, and there's another Enterprise coming, a CVN 80 after that eventually. But right now, the Ford was the only carrier that could operate that. Well, at the time, on Astabe, CVN 72, the fifth of the Nimitz class carriers, was in dry dock. And so it was the first to be modified, first Nimitz-class carrier. Several have been modified now, but it was the first to be modified to operate the F-35. Aboard Honest Abe right now is VMFA 314, the Black Knight Squadron. If those of you who are a little ahead of me, if you know if you know, VMFA means that is a Marine fighter squadron. 314, the Black Knights. Now, if you're a sci-fi geek, Mensch-Kight Geopolitics, your home for obscure sci-fi references, you will note that when Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin and that crowd working for Sony at the time made the movie Independence Day, they went out. I used to see Dean Devlin a lot at the Star Trek conventions and chatted him up. And you want to talk about somebody who knows about making movies, my God. The producers of movies are really interesting people, and they know so many things. Anyway, they have to. That's their business. They went to the military and wanted to make it as realistic as possible. So when they had the squadron that goes to Los Angeles, that our hero, Captain Stephen Hiller, played by, Will Smith, is in this squadron, it was VMFA 314, the Black Knight Squadron. So it was a real squadron that they used in the movie to, because that would be a real squadron that could actually be used if those events actually happened. And which is brilliant. And so now those same Black Knights, as fictionally portrayed in the movie Independence Day from back in the 90s, another one of those great 90s action sci-fi flicks from that era, along with, Air Force One and Terminator 2 and all these. The 90s just had some really great movies. Last Action Hero. We had some great movies back in that era. Anyway, so Independence Day. Oh, Star Trek First Contact. One of the best Star Trek movies, probably, in my opinion, probably the second best, but, big Wrath of Khan fan myself. Just, growing up, that was always my fave. But First Contact is a close, almost a tie, really great movie, well put together and well cast. In any event, so those are the Black Knights. So the Marines, the Marine Corps, will be the first U.S. armed force to take the F-35 into combat. So far, only the Israelis have taken the F-35 into combat, and for the U.S., it will be the Marines. So Semper Fi, go Marines. I have a couple of Marine friends, one who was enlisted, one who was an officer. So, I'm surrounded by jarheads, and as a Navy guy, they give me a lot of garbage about it, and I give them some too. We have a little bit of fun, we go back and forth. Anyway, it's all good fun and, a little banter, and we always joke. But hey, I mean, we can always pick on the chair force and, the space case force and all those people because, I got no time for those guys. Anyway, so, all good stuff. But I just think it's great. The Marines are probably going to take the F-35 into combat first. There are B-52s in the region, a lot of fueling planes I mentioned. So we just have a whole lot of firepower in region, right? Ready to go up against Iran. So, Trump doesn't like getting us into these forever wars. And this mission would be one to bomb the IRGC, the besiege, basically, the branch of the IRGC that is the terrorist organization that acts as a paramilitary force to keep power in Iran, and some elements of the Iranian military. But, the primary target is the regime and its political supporters. To get to them, do this bombing, this isn't necessarily, this won't require us to invade Iran. There are going to be any U.S. ground forces and this kind of thing. I wanted to take a moment. So what are U.S. interests here, right? First of all, we all know this regime is a cancer in the region. They are behind, they've been trying to control Iraq, and they're behind a lot of violence there. They were backing the Assad regime, which murdered hundreds of thousands of Arabs in Syria. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. I mean, they've brought death and destruction to the region. They murdered U.S. Marines in Beirut. They have killed hundreds of Americans and caused all kinds of consternation. And a lot of the weapons that were used by the Iraqi insurgents that killed thousands of Americans in Iraq were made in Iran. Okay, So these guys have done a lot against the U.S. They've tried to assassinate our presidents in the past, including Trump, and high-ranking officials and what have you. Enough is enough. So first of all, they had provoked this, right? They took hostages back in '79. Ayatollah Khamenei made this like the Rest is History podcast just did a thing about the Iranian Revolution. They were pointing out, and this is the thing that everyone else in the world knows, but for Americans, we don't quite pick up on it. Khomeini at the time turned that into a duel between he and Jimmy Carter, knowing that Jimmy Carter was the weaker man. Jimmy Carter was a great, technical guy. He was a sailor and a submariner and all those kinds of things, but he didn't understand how to lead like that. And when Ronald Reagan was elected, the Iranians changed their tune. Right. From the election of Ronald Reagan, the Soviet Union canceled their occupation of Poland. They were going to send the Red Army into Poland and suppress solidarity and crack down on the Poles. And when I say crack down, I mean crack down. Like Iran, there were going to be a lot of body bags and a lot of mass graves. That was what the Soviets had in mind. They saw that Ronald Reagan won the election. They canceled it. And the Iranians arranged to return the hostages at the precise moment that Ronald Reagan took office, making sure that Jimmy Carter got no credit for it. They turned that into a big duel. And that made us, the United States, look bad and look weak, and it was awful. So there's all of that. But let's just imagine, like John Lennon for just a minute, let's imagine a world without the Iranian regime. No more financing for Hezbollah. They'll slowly whittle on the vine, and Lebanon can reassert sovereignty over the southern part of the country, right? Hamas will lose funding and support. The Hamas leaders, there's negotiations going. They may have to leave Gaza and go. I think if the Iranian regime were gone, they would probably just get out of town. The thing is, without the support of Iran, without Iranian backing, the Palestinians aren't going to change. They're not going to stop being racist. They're not going to stop hating Jews. They're not going to stop wanting to kill Israelis. But there are other groups than Hamas that want to do that. And so when Islamic Jihad and PFLP and the Palestinian Authority and other terrorist organizations there realize that Hamas is weak, they're going to vie for power, right? And if Hamas doesn't have Iran's backing and the money and the weapons that result from that, okay, the Houthis, without Iran's weapons, they're going to start to wither on the vine too. And it'd be a chance maybe for, South Yemen to go in there and clean up Yemen. Without the cancerous interventions of Iran, could pull itself together and form something that looks more like a real country, a real state. But if there were a stable democratic Iran, like if Iran just devolves into chaos, then that doesn't, help. But if there were a positive Iran, if we imagine this regime falling, the U.S. could pull out of the sandbox, my friends. In time, we could be out of Syria. We're already out of Iraq, basically. We could leave the Middle East. CENTCOM would just be a few office buildings, right? Everyone could go, and we could go focus that attention on the Pacific. We're already able to pull more stuff out of Europe, especially if Russia goes down. Talk about that more in a minute, and all of that kind of stuff. But it's like, if the Iranian regime is gone, that is huge for the U.S. We've been fighting in the Middle East most of my lifetime, from the Gulf War in 1991, I was 9 years old when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. I'm in middle age now, my friends. It's been constant fighting in the Middle East. We could be out of there. Right. So I'm all with Trump on this. Let's get rid of this regime and let's make this thing happen. So bombs could fall anytime now. There have been some negotiations aimed at the regime surrendering, basically giving up their weapons grade uranium and the leadership fleeing and free elections being held. But this regime isn't going to follow through with that. They're not going to agree to that. So that's that. All right, I'm going to talk about international stuff here soon. War in Ukraine, follow up on Venezuela and what's going on in the Americas. Greenland, not Iceland, Greenland. It's that's going to be interesting. So stay tuned. With all the things going on in the world, I hardly ever get time to talk about Israel anymore. There's just ah so many things. But Rangvili, the remains of the last hostage were brought back. They had to test, um, corpses in a particular cemetery, found his DNA, and he has been returned. So, for the first time in decades, actually, Gaza is hostage free. There are no more hostages in Gaza. So when we do the outro, this will be the last time I'll be playing October Rain by Aidan Golan. And um, in honor of Rangavili's return, I despaired that we were ever going to get any of them back alive. The fact that we got most of the hostages back alive, tormented and tortured though they were, is just incredible. One couple that was there recently got married, lesbian couple, granted, but they had to keep their relationship a secret because the Iranians, or the Iranian, well, the the Palestinians under Iranian control would have, executed them if they had known they were gay, homosexual, right? These are just awful people. Like, you don't have to think that that's the greatest behavior or agree with it, but these people have a right to live and do what they want to do. And whether we agree or not, we're not killing people. And I'm not going to go shoot people because I don't like the way that they live. That'd be a lot of people. Anyway, I can still go out and promote what I think is right and the right way to live, and other people can live how they want to live. And if you ask me, I'll tell you what good values are. I know I've read the Torah, so I know. It would be the Old Testament for the rest of you, but I mean, you can read the Bible and it tells you. And a lot of things like marriage, my understanding is, the New Testament just kind of doubles down on it. Like, what is made in heaven cannot, should not be undone on earth, or what have you. So it's just, these concepts of marriage and not murdering people and not stealing things and just, the moral values kind of doubles down. So this is the shared moral tradition that we have in what they call the Judeo-Christian tradition, but, in Judaism and subsequent Christianity. The moral code that is, anyway. So I'm just glad to have Ron back. We've been waiting entirely too long. For me, the important moment was when we got the last living hostages back. Getting the remains back are also important, because then the family can have closure and those remains can be buried properly in accordance with Jewish law, custom, and tradition. And that is over. October 7th is over. And now we just wait and see what's going to happen. There's this board of peace. Some people, and I'm telling you, the Israeli right and hard right people that are in their sphere are just losing their minds. They are going completely nuts. They are completely meshuggah. And to them, this is all a big balagan. It's all a big mess. That this kind of thing. Mostly because they want Gaza back. They want to kick out all the Arabs and take it over for themselves. And a lot of people, not everyone, a lot of people on the Israeli far right wouldn't mind doing October 7th to the Palestinians. I mean, there are unfortunately, nutterballs among the Jewish community. We're people too. They're a very small minority. They scare most of us, and so we have nothing to do with them. But there are those who propose like a final solution. Generally, they couch it in terms of, we're going to remove these people. And then you say, well, what if they resist? And they're like, well, I hope they do. Okay, then. That's not how I do things. People are attacking us, we defeat them. Go from there. But anyway, they're all upset about the board of peace because they don't want the Palestinians to continue to live in Gaza. They're freaking out, whatever. I've read the scriptures, and I've gained the wisdom of the scriptures that teach us about strategic patience. There is a time to act. As Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, that's what it's called. Kohelet would tell us, there is a time to act and a time to be idle. I've talked about the Chinese philosophy of Wu Wei, the action of inaction, right? Patience, right? In June of 1967, Israel did not have the luxury of patience. The Egyptian fighter pilots were eating breakfast. They were about to go get in their planes and fly into Israel and start dropping bombs on Israeli homes, right? So Israel had to attack and destroy those pilots and those planes on the ground before they could do that. And so we didn't have that opportunity. Now Israel is strong. We're in a strong diplomatic position. Israel has a good, Netanyahu has a good relationship with Trump. Israel has a good relationship with the United States. With the Kurds, growing, and improving relationships with Bahrain and the UAE and the Saudis. It's not formal, but getting along better with the Saudis, at peace with Jordan and Egypt. So, Israel's situation is different. Now we can be patient, strategic patience. So Trump is out there with this board of peace. What is this? What it really looks like is, to be perfectly frank, Trump is just organizing a new UN. He's getting all these people together, all these nations represented, and then he could just be like, well, we've got this board of peace. It's great. It's awesome. It's golden. We're making peace great again. It's all good, but we don't need this UN. Goodbye, and kick him out of New York. That would be beautiful. The UN is basically a terrorist organization, an anti-Semitic terrorist organization. So anyway, he's got this board of peace. Yes, it's got, Pakistan and the, Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, and all of these people who are malignant and not positive players, right? Not people we would normally associate with those who would want to establish peace, okay? But he's got them on this board, and he can pitch to them, hey, you guys keep saying that you're for Palestine, whatever. How about you put your money where your mouth is, right? Now, I'm wondering, because Trump had put this idea out there before, will he pitch to this board of peace? Okay, so half the people of Gaza, half the Palestinians want to leave Gaza. So where do we take them? And instead of this board of peace being and trying to create circumstances that lead to the next, keep the Palestinians as fodder for fighting the Jews, they might actually have to participate in solutions. If I'm not talking about forcing anybody to go, but if these people want to leave, if half the population of Gaza wants to leave, then by all means, send them somewhere. They can move into the Sinai. Move them into Saudi Arabia, move them out into the Arab world. Lovely people. It's not like they commit crimes at much, much higher rates than other people. And, anyway, but they're Arabs, they'll fit in well in other Arab countries, let them leave. If European countries are stupid, generous enough to take those people in, then they can have them too. And so, with strategic patience and a little thought, we could get some of the things we want, a reduced population in Gaza, for example, without having to go the evil route, without having to compromise our moral values and our integrity, right? Just let them go, right? Strategic patience, my friends, strategic patience. I trust Donald Trump. He's not an anti-Semite. I know he's got things going on. He's got a plan here, He'll make this work out better. Now, if it doesn't, it's like, well, we tried, right? And then Israel can go back in and finish off Hamas, and we'll figure things out after that, right? But the optics, right? Trump will be able to say, look, I created this. I got the Turks and the Pakistanis and everybody came together and we tried to do a thing and it didn't work. But we tried. Well, now the Israelis are just going to have to go back in there and finish things off. And then all of a sudden people are, wait, well, we could put a little money toward this. Oh yeah, we could. Yeah, we'll help out. That might change their tune a little bit. But we keep getting the situation where, Erdogan, all these other people, Pakistanis, they keep, the Jews are bad, the Jews are bad, the Jews are bad, Israel bad, Israel, blah, 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 and they never have anything constructive to contribute. Well, Trump is creating a circumstance where they're going to have to contribute something constructive. And if they don't, it'll be bad PR for them, right? So, go Donald. So I'm with that. We'll wait and we'll see. Strategic patience. If it turns out to be a bad thing, it'll be a bad thing. Good and bad things happen. Good and bad things end. Right? And we'll see. But Israel's in a much stronger position to deal with it. If the Iranian regime is gone, that is the key. The attention needs to be there. Khamenei and the Iranian regime, that is the cancer in the region. Without them, this is the one time in my lifetime we've really had a shot at getting rid of them. In 2006, when they, Hezbollah, Hamas, they're bombing Israel and all that. I sat down with a number of people in the pro-Israel community, and we were just talking about different things. And I said, Iran is the problem now. Like we used to be that all the Arab countries were the problem, the Saudis, the Jordanians. Eventually, we made peace here and there with different countries, but it was this pan-Arab thing. They were all against us. And I said, now the problem is Iran. Without Iran, the Saudis aren't going to do anything, right? The Emiratis, all of them, the Kuwaitis, everybody's tired of this. They're done with this conflict, right? The problem is Iran. And everyone started shaking their heads. And, wow, that's profound, And the more we talked about it, the more we realized, yeah, behind Hamas, behind Hezbollah, the Houthis weren't a thing back then, but, that Iran was the problem in the region. So let's get rid of that problem. Real quick, Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez is resisting a little bit, so we may end up intervening there again. Maybe some attacks to pressure that government to let Western oil companies come back in and start rebuilding the oil infrastructure. Exporting oil again would be good for Venezuela, but if they don't want to cooperate, well, sucks to be you. We're not going to play this game anymore. And if Delcy Rodriguez wants to join Nicolas Maduro in a prison cell, well, that can be arranged, quite honestly. We've heard about this discombobulator. I've been seeing a lot of stuff about this secret weapon for a while. The Havana syndrome stories we were getting after a while ago. I like to read this stuff, but I don't always talk about it on the podcast because a lot of it's rumors and that kind of thing. Anyway, but they were able to use this weapon, and it completely disabled the missile systems and radars, and shut down Venezuela's Russian and Chinese air defenses. And it apparently was able to disable these Cuban guards. 32 Cuban guards were ghosted, and we took no losses. There was one American injured and a helicopter damaged, but still flyable, right? So there you go. Interesting. The wonderful things that we have, the weapons that we have that nobody knows about. It's just awesome. We're truly in a science, we're living science fiction now. Let me talk about Greenland real quick, and then I'll move on to Russia and China. China, as Trump likes to say, in China. It's a Chinese virus, China. All right. So anyway, talked a lot about the strategic position of Greenland. There was a really great graphic somebody shared. I shared it on X. It's buried way down in my feed now, but you could find it if you wanted to. Mensch-Kight geopolitics on X, Twitter, if you will, formerly the platform formerly known as Twitter. Anyway, it's there, and this graphic showed probable launch locations for Russian ICBMs targeted at Washington, D.C. And all of the lines, but just, a few of them, like 90% of the lines crossed over Greenland. Now, obviously, if the Russians were shooting at the U.S., they'd be shooting at targets all across the U.S., right? Right now, we have 40 anti-ballistic missile interceptors up in Alaska and 4 more at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. So on the western side of the U.S., we could shoot down a number of those incoming missiles, but we have nothing in Greenland and we have nothing south of there. We need to get those, anti-ballistic missiles. And I'm telling you, they need to be nuclear armed. Small tactical warhead, maybe 10K, but the physical intercept, I don't even want to go into it, but like the physical intercept is just kind of dumb. Put a warhead in there. When it, reaches its target, it can just explode and neutralize the whole thing. And if the MIRV is, if it's already launching MIRVs, these multiple independently targetable reentry vehicles, warheads, right? If it's doing all of that, you'll neutralize everything in the immediate area, right? So that would be a smarter way to go, in my opinion. Anyway, and then, you have a second layer into that of THAAD, and maybe a third layer underneath that, tertiary defense. I'd like to see, talking about this, with some friends, like, get a bunch of microsatellites out there with lasers on them that could shoot at these rockets in first and second stage. Like as soon as they lift off from the ground, just have thousands of little satellites up there, like Starlink. They could just, each of them beam lasers at these missiles, and if they can generate enough heat, they'll cause the fuel to explode, to ignite in the missile, and the whole thing blows up. Well, then it's no longer a threat. Who knows? The point is, this Golden Dome thing is huge, and we need more of Greenland for that. We also need the resources there. It would be good for the U.S. We are headed into an era where we can't count on this global trade going on forever and ever ad nauseum, right? So we need to make sure that the Americas are under our thumb. And that's increasingly happening. We have more allies in South America. Bolsonaro's son is looking at running for president against Lula da Silva in Brazil. He's polling well. Petra is almost done in Colombia, so hopefully they'll get a better president soon. And Scheinbaum and Obrador, AMLO, as we like to call him, their terms will come to an end eventually, 2030. And, maybe Mexico will elect the PAN party again and start working on reform and, actually trying to grow their economy. Mexico has all of these opportunities, all of this potential. They won't use it. God, it's frustrating, my friends. It's like, that friend that if they just get off their tuchus and work, they'd do great things for themselves, but they'd rather sit on their tuchus and not work. And I have some high school friends I ran into years ago on a visit back home to California, and find out that one of the smartest guys in my class, stayed home and didn't do anything with himself. That's frustrating. I'm out here, banging away, trying to make a career for myself and feed my 7 kids and struggling, my friends, like everyone else does. It's a country song, sounds like life to me, right? Just another day in life, right? So anyway, point is, Mexico could do a lot for itself. Okay, so we have that. In Greenland, a lot of people don't understand how close Greenland came to doing that Belt and Road nonsense and having a whole bunch of debt to China and being basically enslaved to China. It came so close, and the Russians want in too. Let me tell you, my friends, if the Russians want Greenland and the Chinese want Greenland, we do not want them to have Greenland. That is a fundamental rule of strategy, that if your opponents want something, you do not want them to have it, right? Unless you're absolutely certain that it is strategically irrelevant to them, or you can strategize so that it's strategically irrelevant, right? So, but if they have an objective, you don't want them to take that objective, okay? And, when it comes to the resources there, we have the money to develop that, right? Denmark doesn't. Greenland doesn't. No one is going in there to develop those minerals unless we invest in it. And why should we go in and make money for Denmark, right? I mean, we should make money for us. And as Trump has pointed out, ownership, we'll defend something that we own, right? So the U.S. will end up controlling and actually having sovereignty over more of Greenland. What's interesting, I mean, basically most of the Greenland parties ran on independence. They won independence from Denmark, or at least they did until Trump started talking about this. So Greenland could become independent under U.S. protection, or they could become a U.S. territory ultimately. But Trump has achieved with all of his rhetoric, not the way I would have pursued it, okay, but he has been successful, that he will have a big chunk of Greenland and we'll be able to get China out. They actually control some of the mining there, Chinese companies. So it's time to get rid of China from there. So just like, China was in Bolivia, and they're all over the Americas, and we've got to get them out of our hemisphere. It's part of our security. It's good that people are finally addressing this. All right. Russia, then China. Russian casualties. Dead, missing, wounded, captured. Something like 1.2 million now, the highest of any major power since World War II, right? I mean, just inconceivable numbers here. We could never have, inconceivable. We could, I cannot believe we're here. This is just insane, but I know that this is what Vladimir Putin would have to do. I know Putin. right? How do I know? Am I some kind of, am I clairvoyant? Can I read the future? Whatever. No, I just watched his pattern. That's the kind of psychopath that Vladimir Putin is. And he'll send more. At this point, what we're hearing is the Russian army is recruiting about 50,000 men a month, and the Ukrainians are killing about 30,000 men a month. So the Ukrainian goal of killing 50,000 men a month and thus slowly attriting Russian forces down, they're getting there, and they're doing this with infantry tactics. It's changed a little bit in the last little bit here. You'll get a sniper and a drone operator, two guys in a village, and they'll go out and they'll kill hundreds of Russians. The two of them. The sniper protects their position, and the drone operator goes out and drops grenades on these guys and shoots them and does, blows them up. And these infantry tactics are incredibly effective. So instead of having trenches like World War I, and this is how warfare is evolving in real time, my friends. It was 6 months ago that you had these trenches, and for like 10 kilometers in either direction, right, about 7 miles, 6, 7 miles. For those of you who are, only know your imperial, for 10 kilometers in either direction, and sometimes 20, it was a no man's land, right? You could not move in those areas because drones would come and fiber optic cables all over the place, as these drones were, controlled by these cables so that they couldn't be jammed. And supplies are being brought in by robots on the Ukrainian side because they didn't want to risk men getting killed in this zone. So it's like you had a front line, you had a trench, and then you had this zone behind it that was no man's land, as opposed to World War I, where the no man's land was in between the trenches. Now, the point of contact isn't a trench, it isn't a line, it's a series of outposts. The Russians have a series of outposts. Some of them get kind of mixed up, where sometimes the Ukrainians are kind of in the Russian lines and the Russians are in the Ukrainian lines and this kind of thing. And it's just this zone of combat that's not quite a no man's land. It's like, any man's land, where they're just constantly fighting. The Russians are advancing meters, yards, right? A matter of yards in the places where they're advancing. They're not making significant gains, and the Ukrainians are just massacring them in incredible numbers. That is not sustainable. And you hear all these people, even Neil Ferguson, the strength of the Russian wartime economy, we cannot underestimate. This kind of thing. Like, the Russians can't keep doing this. Math matters, my friends. You can't keep doing it. They're out of money. Their economy is stretched thin. Their oil infrastructure has been damaged. Europeans are going after the shadow fleet now. America is going after, Ukraine, Venezuelan shadow tankers. The Ukrainians are bombing ships in the Black Sea. They just shot down another Sukhoi 34 or Su-34 plane today. At least it was reported. It can't be verified. But, that's the Ukrainian reports are pretty accurate. The Ukrainians don't tend to claim they've done something unless they actually have. So this isn't sustainable for Russia. Trump's tried to give Putin every out. He's tried to give Putin the opportunity to have an honorable way out, where Putin could keep some of the territory that he's captured, most of it, in fact, and the line of contact would become the new border, kind of North Korea, South Korea kind of thing, and there'd be an armistice, and Ukraine would not recognize the occupation of those territories, but they would cease fire, and Russians would cease fire, and the war would end. Right. And, Trump would have security guarantees for Ukraine, and we'd continue building up their military and sending them weapons. We, the United States, continue to send weapons to Ukraine. They're just being paid for by the Europeans. Romania, Denmark, Germany, the EU, they're putting money up. They're buying the weapons, Patriot batteries and all this kind of thing, right? So America is still sending weapons to Ukraine. We're just not paying for them anymore. It's about time the Europeans, footed the bill. Right? This war is to defend them, after all. And they talk about, well, we want to be a geopolitical power again. Well, you didn't stand up to Putin. You're still buying gas from the guy. Right? You're still financing. God, my friends. Angela Merkel made them dependent, Germany dependent on Russian gas, and shut down all their nuclear plants. It was ridiculous. It was the dumbest approach ever. France at least kept their nuclear plants open, and so France is doing better. But Germany's going to have to reopen the nuke plants or build more coal. And, natural gas is a problem because LNG from the United States is expensive, right? More expensive than the Russian. But the Russian has an expense that is beyond dollars or euros, right? It has an expense in Ukrainian blood, right? And future European blood, Polish blood, Romanian blood, German blood, when Russia decides eventually to move into other territories. So there's that. How long can that be sustained? I mean, I don't know. Trump has tried to give Putin an out. Putin won't take it. I said he wouldn't. Funny thing, I was right. You're a prophet of things to come. I wish I had been wrong. God, if Putin had taken the smart play here and just taken the way out and tried to rebuild his economy and that kind of thing, he probably wouldn't live to see Russia be able to go on the march again, but Russia might survive. Now, I mean, it could happen in a day that Russia just falls apart. Like it could just collapse, anytime now. Um, 5 out of the last 9 Russian missile tests have failed. So when it comes to their strategic weapons, they're running at less than 50%. So, they say they have 300 missiles in the ground. At their best case scenario is about 150 of them would leave the ground. maybe, quite a few less than, quite a bit fewer than that. And then how many of those would even reach the US? Now, we don't want to find out. Okay, I'm just making the point that Russia's position as a nuclear power is, less and less worth talking about. And without tritium, I mean, those are just tactical warheads, 10, 12 kiloton. Not good, again, but not megatons. Okay, they need the tritium, Anyway, I've covered all that in previous episodes. You can go back and listen. All right. China. Now, this is really interesting. Xi Jinping has purged generals before, right? But now he's really got himself into a spot. The military in China is the last institution that could actually remove Xi from power. I've talked about how in the Communist Party and in the National Congress, the Deng faction that's dedicated to Deng Xiaoping, the former president, the two systems, one country, two systems, right? Capitalist economy, communist country. That faction and the Mao faction are kind of linking up together against Xi. So there's been some political pushback, but they don't have weapons, right? The People's Liberation Army does. And, they're generals. So Zhang Youxia was, their leading general, chairman of the Chinese Military Command Council, CMC, right? This leadership council. And Xi has had a bunch of those guys arrested. And this is, with Zhang's arrest, it kind of seems to have upset the military. Now, allow me to preface this. I have to do a little caveat. We are hearing rumors from China of all kinds of things. So a lot of what I'm about to present is based on rumors. Why? Why would I tell you rumors? I don't spread rumors. It's something that Jews just don't do. These are rumors and reports that may not be accurate, but the problem is news is suppressed in China. We don't get the news of what's going on. It's not like, I can go look for verified sources on this stuff. We are hearing that there have been shots fired in Beijing. We are hearing that possibly one of Xi's decoy convoys, one of his decoy and some of his security people were shot at by the military, and that some of Xi's security forces have exchanged gunfire with the military in a separate incident. So we're hearing these things. It's possible. It could be happening. I don't know. In fact, nobody knows. Nobody knows for sure except Xi and people in Beijing. But news can't get out of there. They suppress the news. So I don't know. Could you make a fake video of Beijing with gunfire in the background or what look like explosions? Oh, sure. Easily. So you just can't trust somebody sharing something. We don't know. And there are always these people who, despite, their good intentions, have it in mind that they want to portray the Chinese regime as being perpetually in collapse. And they're always, every time Xi goes on a retreat, they're, oh, Xi's been removed from power. Nobody's seen him in 2 weeks. Well, he normally vacations this time of year. Well, okay. But um, this may be real. This may be happening. So I don't know. If the military is pushing back, if the military is seeking to get General Zhang freed, if they are, that could mean that there is a coup in progress. Doesn't mean that they'll succeed, just means that there's some pushback. She may make a deal with Zhang and set him free and could end this, right? The pushback that the military has had, it seems, at least according to rumors, again, nobody knows this for sure because, we're not allowed to hear the conversations that go on behind closed doors. And nobody will tell Xi any bad news to his face, apparently. The military is trying to convince Xi that there is no military option on Taiwan. The military commanders, and General Zhang is one of the few who has some military, actual war experience, has actually fought in combat. He has seen the elephant, right? There are very few military commanders in China who have actually fought in any kind of campaign. China hasn't fought a war since, there was their incident with the Soviet Union and there was their war with Vietnam, but they haven't fought a war since the late 70s. So, a lot of the men who fought in that war are now ancient, like General Zhang, and few and far between. And so the military's been pushing back that there's no military option with Taiwan. And of course, Xi wants a war in 2027. Like next year, he wants to go and take Taiwan, and the military is trying to convince him. That's what we're hearing. The pushback is that the military thinks Xi is leading the country in the wrong direction and that they don't want to fight, right? They don't want this war. In that case, go Chinese military. People's Liberation Army may be smart enough to know that they can't win this fight. Who knows? We will see. If Xi Jinping is brought down out of power, it will take China some time to pull itself together. The Hu Jintao faction is still out there. Hu is still alive. He's under house arrest along with his family. His son and his protege are still out there. So those people could be involved in a coalition government. General Zhang, if he's alive and freed, liberated maybe by his military forces, he could potentially be part of this government. There are other leaders in China who could theoretically, who are not with Xi's party, but it will take them time to get themselves organized. And by the time they would really kind of have themselves back on track, it could be 3, 4, 5 years. The US military will be better prepared for conflict. And I think we'll all know at that point that there won't be a conflict. So we'll see what happens. If Xi prevails, and he has been through a lot of this stuff before. We're not sure. I mean, if there is actual shooting, that's different. That's new. But he's a pretty smart guy, and he's very good tactically. We'll see. I don't know. Like I said, I wish I did have solid answer. I wish I could just tell you exactly what's happening. But unfortunately, with China, it's really difficult to get a handle on what's going on there. One of the best resources is China Update. I listen often. It's a great YouTube channel. Good information, really solid. And even, he's had to admit, look, what I'm telling you now is based on rumors. We just don't know. It's difficult. You can't trust firsthand accounts because there are always people who want to embellish. So it's been a very bad time for the Axis powers. My thinking is after what happened in Venezuela happened. So let me back up because this is based on a historical thing. The Soviet Union, so the wall had fallen in 1989, but the Soviet Union was kind of hanging on by a thread, and they were kind of losing heart. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the reunification of Germany in 1990, basically took the heart out of the hardcore communists. Basically, they realized they had lost the Cold War. If they were giving Germany back, their part of Germany back, they had lost without firing a shot. Like, they were one day, they were tough, Russian, Soviet Union, really, and the next day, you're wimps. It's over. And Soviet Union went downhill fast after that. And then in early 1991, the U.S. had the war with Iraq, right? Saddam Hussein had all these T-72s and all these Russian helicopters, the Hind attack helicopters and these kinds of things. And so everyone thought, oh my God, he's got all this army. It's so high tech. 10,000 soldiers could die. American soldiers could die, and Brits and French and everyone in the coalition, like the coalition forces are going to be. And, our forces, the Missouri and the Wisconsin bombarded Iraqi positions outside Kuwait City. The Marines landed. The Iraqis fled. They ran away and got bombed on the way out. And the army, crossed the southern border into Kuwait through the desert and came in. And when they got to Kuwait City, the Marines were like, hey, guys, yo, how are you? Okay. The T-72 was junk. The Iraqi helicopters were junk. Nothing the Soviet Union had given them, the air defense systems, the Scud missiles, it was all junk. The Scuds were hitting down in Riyadh and in Tel Aviv, but the Patriot missiles were intercepting some of them. But the point is they can't be targeted accurately, and yet we could drop a bomb through a window in Baghdad, right? Our weapons are very accurate. Russian military leaders saw that how far behind they were technologically, and it was just shocking, as the Soviet Union was just falling apart right then and there. So the shock was a big part of the collapse of the Soviet Union, ultimately. What happened in Venezuela was shocking. Right? It happened very quickly. The missile systems were all junk. I mean, we flew helicopters in at low altitude, at low speed. They're not fast, right? In and got Maduro and left, right? Maybe the Chinese military saw that and they're hearing about our military preparations and talk of building battleships and all that. And they get spooked and realized, holy crap, if we go to war, this could be really bad. Right. And maybe they started pushing back against Xi because of that. And like, look, the Americans have weapons we have no defense for. Regardless of, again, sword and shield. I've talked to you guys. They've got a sword and we have no shield. Right. We have no defense against this. We don't know if we can make a kind of helmet that protects our guys from it. We don't know but we don't have the shield. Therefore, there is a weapon we can't counter. And we don't understand how it works. And we can't, we need time. We need to work on this. And Xi is pressing ahead with his agenda. That's what I think is happening. I think the military has realized that he's dangerous and that he's delusional. And they know that any war is going to be a disaster. And it's like, if you're in the military, are you going to send hundreds of thousands of young Chinese men to die, knowing that they're going to their deaths inevitably? I mean, I wouldn't want to. I don't like sending our people to die. Right. I much prefer that we, take care of our business and not get involved in other people's when we don't have to. Right. But when Iran is a huge threat to us, maybe we have to. Okay. With that, another episode. We will see what happens. I'm sure Trump is going to do something. It always happens. I'll record this episode. By the time I even publish it, I'll try. I try to publish it the next day. But by the time I publish this, I guarantee the news cycle will be different and something else will have happened. We'll know then. Okay. Please like the podcast, rate it. That helps other people see it. Subscribe if you're on YouTube. Again, this is going to be the last time that October Rain is used as the outro. I promised that I would use it as long as there were hostages left in Gaza, and Rangvili represents the last hostage returned. So for the family of Rangvili, for those mourning the loss of an incredible and heroic young Israeli man, young Jew, this is for you for one last time.
Writers of the history, stand with me. Look into my eyes and see. People go away but never say goodbye. Someone stole the moon tonight, took my light. Everything is black and white. Who's the fool who told hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes by. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Living in a fantasy, ecstasy, everything is meant to be. We shall pass, but love will never die. Hours and hours and flowers. Life is no game for the cowards. Why the time goes wild. Every day I'm losing my mind, holding on in this mysterious ride, dancing in the storm. We got nothing to hide. Take me home and leave the world behind. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. October rain. Baby, promise me that never again. I'm still wet from this October rain. October rain. Schon en balkon, אין אותי מיום ליום, כולם ילדים טובים אחד אחד. Bring them back home.